I watched the Duncan Trussell interview of Alex Jones that recently aired, and I want to share my thoughts. Honestly, it felt off base. Things aren't presented academically or intellectually, and there's little way to verify any of it, oftentimes standing adjacent to intellectual discourse but falling just short. At a deeper subconscious level, it struck me as a clear example of propaganda, full of rapid topic shifts, division, confusion, and an overload of ideas that seemed designed to make viewers feel unsettled about the actual, terrible truths being revealed. It doesn't engage with the material in any meaningful or constructive way. While there are kernels of factual concern, the framing and delivery create distraction rather than understanding, which seems to exemplify the very techniques we're supposed to watch out for in terms of destabilization through mental/emotional overwhelming. I used to be a huge fan of Alex Jones. When I was younger, he felt like one of the few people willing to say things out loud that others were afraid to say. But after finally reading Behold a Pale Horse by Milton William Cooper, my perception changed. A lot of the ideas that Jones built his career around already existed in that book decades earlier. That realization made it feel less like he was uncovering hidden truths, and more like he was performing a role, almost as if he were reading from a script that had already been written. What made the disillusionment deeper was noticing the pattern of how he delivered those ideas, often loudly, theatrically, and in ways that made the claims sound so extreme that most people would immediately dismiss them. It began to seem like a strange paradox, telling pieces of truth but presenting them in a way that discredits the truth itself. A kind of truthful liar where the content might contain real concerns, but the performance makes the entire message easier to ignore. Another thing that started to stand out to me was the change in tone over time. For years, Jones' style was explosive. Anger, shouting, urgency, constant alarms. But recently, especially in longer conversations and interviews, that tone seems noticeably calmer and more restrained. Whether that shift comes from legal pressures, age, or simply adapting to a different media environment, it feels like a major departure from the persona that originally built his audience. When someone spends years encouraging outrage and then suddenly becomes more measured just as certain debates or controversies become more publicly discussed, it raises questions about what role that earlier theatrical style was really playing. Unlike most whistleblowers, who often face intense government or institutional retaliation for exposing wrongdoing, Alex Jones has largely avoided such pressure throughout his career. Figures like Milton William Cooper, for example, suffered direct threats and severe consequences for their disclosures, yet Jones was able to repeatedly present controversial claims to a wide audience with minimal interference. The only time he faced serious legal consequences was not for exposing truths or challenging power structures, but for civil violations tied to the families of Sandy Hook victims, highlighting a striking inconsistency in how accountability has applied to him compared to other truth-tellers. This discrepancy raises questions about the role he has played and the unusual tolerance granted to his public persona. Watching the conversation between Duncan Trussell and Alex Jones added another layer to that feeling. I've always appreciated Duncan Trussell as a comedian and philosophical storyteller, someone who usually approaches ideas with curiosity and a playful skepticism. But in that interview, the dynamic felt very different. Instead of probing or challenging claims, the tone often seemed unusually deferential, almost like a student listening to a mentor, rather than an interviewer exploring ideas. Compared to other interviews Jones has done, where hosts press him for clarification or push back on certain points, the interaction here felt surprisingly one-sided. Trussell even references the coding language and layout of a chip and motherboard as resembling demonic sigils, a common theme in conspiracy circles, but then immediately jokes about getting one himself. The joke, though, lands in a way that would resonate with any sufferer of mental disability. I want it right now, so I don't have ADHD anymore. In doing so, he is entertaining the idea of putting a demon inside his head. Meanwhile, Jones, who has spent decades discrediting truth through performance, is treated as an unquestionable mentor. Trussell's performance is forced, uneven, and almost childlike, while Jones portrays a persona of stoic leadership. This moment underscores the truthful liar archetype and suggests a symbolic handoff of that mantle from Jones to Trussell. If this passing of the torch is real, one can't help but wonder, what will be the next script? Will it draw from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Brave New World, or even the 1930s film Metropolis? All of which explore themes of technological control, human-machine merging, and systemic manipulation that have permeated pop culture repeatedly. There was also a strange tension in the moral messaging of the conversation itself. On one hand, the discussion touched on fears about technology, control, and systems that shape human behavior. On the other hand, the same podcast regularly pauses to promote products, sponsorships, in a way that feels heavily corporatized and forced, inserting advertisements right into the middle of serious discussions, in addition to YouTube commercials as well as several rather sly plug disguised in anecdotal points of reference. That contrast creates an odd dissonance, warning about systems of influence and manipulation, while simultaneously participating in the same commercial ecosystem. None of this necessarily proves any hidden agenda, but the contradictions are hard to ignore. Finally, beyond the performance and the handoff, the video carries all the hallmarks of modern propaganda. The messaging is dripping with subliminal cues, and very little of the exchange constitutes genuine intellectual debate. Topics are raised with intriguing claims, but the discussion almost never delves into any depth. The conversation's tone is vacillative, moving rapidly from one subject to another before the viewer has time to process anything. This constant shift, paired with authoritative delivery and theatrical cues, is a classic brainwashing tactic, forcing absorption of ideas without reflection and normalizing beliefs through performance rather than reasoned argument.
Hey everyone, this has been my rants and reviews. Thank you so much for listening. If you found anything that I said about Duncan Trussell or Alex Jones interesting, please comment below. Also like, subscribe, share with your friends. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.